Our last line of evidence for evolution is a more theoretical or mathematical argument that builds upon what we saw in artificial selection, that variation, selection, and heredity are key to evolutionary responses. So in this math argument, we're looking at variation, selection, heredity. So this is coming from the Breeder's equation. So this is essentially evolution, right? Change. This is heredity. And this is, variation is within the selection differential, right? Things needed to be variable in order for selection to occur. So basically, mathematically, if a reproducing population has heritable variation, if you've got this, and if some of those variants, and these are because of the heritable differences, have a better chance of reproducing than others, so you have this, if this and this, then evolution of the population by selection will occur, right? If you have this and this, you'll get a response, there will be a change. So if you have heritable variation and selection occurs, you'll get the evolution of a population. That's kind of a mathematical truth. Now if you look at your book, when your book is describing this sort of thing, the book uses 4 conditions instead of these 2. It talks about how individuals within the species are variable. Some of those variations are passed along to the offspring. So this is heritable variation, 1 and 2. In every generation, more offspring are produced than can survive. So this creates selection, or the potential for selection. And then number 4, survival and reproduction are not random. Ones who survive and reproduce have the most favorable variants. They're naturally selected. So this 3 and 4 are like the selection. The reason your book presents it this way is because historically, this is how Darwin came up with the idea, right? So he was seeing a bunch of variation in nature. He knew, and everybody else knew, that offspring resemble their parents. And he read a book by Malthus demonstrating or arguing that there's just way more individuals being born than can possibly survive if growth was unchecked. There must be a check to survival, some sort of selection going on. And so in Darwin's head, this is how he thought about it. But just because that's how he thought about it doesn't mean that's the clearest, most concise way to think about it. This kind of 2 condition set here is a more elegant way of presenting it. So returning back to this, if the reproducing population has heritable variation, and if some of those variants have better chance of reproducing, then evolution occurs. One of the things to note is that I didn't talk about living things, I didn't talk about DNA, I didn't talk about any life here at all. This is any population that has variation, some sort of heredity, and some sort of selection. So we actually can create computer programs in computers where if you allow a bunch of different programs to compete with each other for memory space, and then programs can copy themselves and make copies that are very similar to themselves, you can see the evolution of these computer programs within the computers. An idea of mine that I like is this idea of corporate strategies, the different types of strategies that companies use. You can think about them like this, right? There's a bunch of different strategies. When new CEOs get hired by companies, they use one of those strategies. Some of those strategies create more profit. If that's true, and if profit is favored and selection favors profit, then you have an evolution of corporate strategies towards those ones that increase profit, even if maybe that sets you up for a big catastrophic failure in the future. There are a number of people who think about cultural ideas or memes having some of these same properties, that these behaviors and cultural ideas vary. There's heredity, right? We pronounce words differently. People pronounce words the same way that they hear them, and then that can cause the evolution of language or ideas. So it's not a requirement that the things that evolve have to be alive. It's just a requirement that they have to have variation, heredity, and selection. Now, when we identify these as the 3 most important aspects of evolution, we can understand, and we can better understand, how evolution works. So for example, HIV reverse transcriptase is the enzyme that HIV uses to put itself into the host genome. That reverse transcriptase makes many mistakes, right? It doesn't have proofreading proteins to help it minimize its mutation rate. So that means that when HIV reproduces, it makes lots of mistakes, lots of mutations, so it has a very, very high variation. And what that means is if we look at the evolution of HIV, because of reverse transcriptase, the variation is very high. That allows the selection differential to be very, very high, and that even though the heritability is lower, right, because more mutations means the offspring look less like their parents, even if this is a little bit less, the combination of a very large value here with the heritability of these viruses allows them to evolve very quickly, faster than our immune systems can keep up with. So one of the ways in which HIV is such a kind of successful virus is that it has a very high rate of evolution. Why does it have a high rate of evolution? Because of its ability to create variation with its non-proofread reverse transcriptase. So having this kind of knowledge of what's important for things to evolve allows us to better understand the evolution of things that are occurring. And so the fact that any system with these things will evolve, and the fact that biological organisms have those three things, means that biological organisms are one of the things that will evolve over time, just like these things.